Good morning. This is the Great Basin prescribed fire briefing for Monday, October 23rd. On the precipitation map of the past 7 days, bone dry across the Great Basin. You see near 0% of normal precip and basically almost no precipitation at all. And that has dried out surface fuels, the duff, the grasses, and we look here at the 100-hour fuels. Areas in gold here in eastern and southern areas are down between 6 and 10%. Elsewhere in the yellow into the low to mid-teens. And 1,000-hour fuels also in the south, up in the Spring Mountains, some of the higher terrain of southern Nevada, down into the 6 to 10% range. Those are numbers we normally encounter during the middle of fire season. And even further north, being in the low to mid-teens, also drier than normal, a little bit higher values up in parts of eastern Idaho and western Wyoming. Looking at satellite imagery, it is more of a winter map. There is a fairly deep low pressure area down over Tonopah. So bringing cooler temperatures at a cold front push through many areas. A deeper low up here in northern British Columbia, dropping down out of the Yukon, and that's going to bring a change in our weather as we go to the middle of the week. So a lot of things going on. Here's the weather map today. Here's a little thin line of clouds and showers across parts of Nevada and into eastern Idaho and maybe western Wyoming. Cooler air behind it. Ventilation index overall, areas in the white have good vertical and horizontal mixing, and a lot of those areas are there. Looking at individual components, looking at surface winds. A little bit gusty here in parts of Nevada, mostly out of the north. You can see the wind barbs here if you zoom in and look very carefully. But further eastwards, winds are mostly out of the south. You can see our cold front basically stretching from Vegas to Salt Lake City. Areas to the east of it have southerly wind flow. Areas to the west of it have more of a northerly wind flow and more of a northwesterly wind flow in the Snake River Plain. You see the minimum humidities here, driest in the southeast, teens to low 20s, and getting up into the 30s and 40s as you head further north. Now, the transport winds, I should actually start to the right on the mixing heights. You can see vertical mixing here. Once you get towards the oranges and reds, those are 4, 5 to 7,000 feet above ground level that smoke can freely rise before it starts leveling off. A little bit lower in the north, but still maybe 3 to 4,000 feet. And the average wind speed from the surface to the top of that mixing layer, those are our transport winds, and those are always stronger than the surface winds. You can see some of the gusty ones here in the oranges. Those are transport winds in the 20s, lighter elsewhere. Now, on Tuesday, the weather map changes. Deep low that dropped down out of British Columbia is really starting to deepen off the British Columbia coast. We get a brief reprieve here in central and southern portions of the Great Basin with drier air. Ventilation index, areas in the white are excellent. Areas in the red could see a bit of stagnation. Part of that is with the light winds in southern areas, but you see the winds picking up in speeds to about maybe 14 to 20 miles an hour in the north ahead of that deep storm system. Relative humidity starting to, still dry actually in southern and central areas, and in the 30s up into the mountains of Idaho. So that could be a good burn day still. We can have one more good burn day on Tuesday before our weather starts going downhill. Transport winds do start picking up out of the southwest this time across northern Nevada, and definitely gusty of 30 to 40 mile an hour transport winds in the mountains of Idaho and western Wyoming. Vertical mixing looking very good, 3 to 6,000 feet in most areas. Now on Wednesday, that storm system deepening now off the Seattle coast. The areas in green and dark green is where it's overcast with steady precipitation, some of it moderate to locally heavy in the dark green. So you can see the northern part of the Great Basin will be under that influence. That means you typically, when a storm system comes in, that cleans out the air, so ventilation index is excellent. The surface winds picking up. A gusty wind day. Areas in the orange, winds are going to be 25 to 35 miles an hour. And that'll be mostly across central and southern areas. Northern areas will see a decrease a bit in the wind as the precipitation arrives, but you see the minimum humidity definitely coming up. So the mountains of central Idaho, 50 to 70 plus percent. And even in the south, the humidity starting to come up. Very strong transport winds. So this could put a lot of burning under out of prescription. Some of these transport winds are 35 to 45, maybe even close to 50 miles an hour. Vertical mixing, obviously excellent with the cold front, several thousand feet upwards. 3-day precipitation totals. Most of this will be arriving on Wednesday. light to locally moderate amounts. Where you see the greens, those are a quarter to a half inch, more than a half inch in some parts towards McCall and the central Idaho mountains. And with colder air coming in, a lot of that above 6,000 feet, it's going to be in the form of snow. Same thing for western Wyoming. Now, as we go into Thursday, the storm system, at least the first one, is pushing into eastern areas where the dark green is. That's where we expect to see precipitation, a brief wedge of dry air. But we're going to see the storm system is going to retrograde backwards into the Pacific Northwest on Friday and merge with this moisture and create a very deep, moist, low-pressure area with lots of precipitation for a good portion of southern and central areas on Saturday, and cold with snow levels dropping down to near or below 6,000 feet in a lot of areas. Obviously, excellent mixing with that kind of a pattern, and that precipitation moves into southern and eastern areas on Sunday. Drier, cooler air with northerly flow pushing into Idaho and northern Nevada by the end of the weekend. Precipitation, this is Thursday morning through Saturday morning. You can see light to locally moderate amounts, actually locally heavy in the northern Wasatch and Uintas and western Wyoming. Days 6 and 7, this is Saturday morning through Sunday night. And again, light to locally moderate amounts continuing, especially across the higher terrain of eastern areas. And the 7-day totals are here. So definitely a trend towards wetter as we go towards the middle and latter part of the period. And the 8 to 14 day outlook shows either cooler than normal or near normal temperature-wise, and definitely on the right, a signal to wetter than normal conditions as we go from October 30th into November 5th. So basically the first week of November. Concludes our briefing. Have a great day. Next one coming up on Wednesday.